I'm going to talk a little bit about every child, every educator, one interaction at a time. And a part of the sort of narrative of us being together is we have a lot of work to do. We all have done a lot of work. We are impacting hundreds of thousands of children together. And yet, every single child, every single educator that we work with feels that impact in different ways. And sometimes when we're trying to do big things, we forget about the small, but so important moments. And so how do we hold that tension together and continue to work to do big, amazing things that are changing the landscape of what it is to be in an early childhood classroom? But quite frankly, and I know I have a few K-12 folks here, but also to show what a community can do in ways that, frankly, I think aren't happening at a large scale in the K-12 world. So first, I have the same sort of picture to represent the sort of breadth that is represented of impact in this room, but also to recognize that each of you as an individual is here bringing your own ideas and passions for the work. And we're excited to hear those stories. You'll hear some of them in sessions when we're together, but we'll also have many opportunities at our cocktail hour over breakfast to hear the stories of the individual impact. And I'd like to recognize one particular person in the room, Lisa. I actually haven't seen you this morning, Lisa. Lisa. So Lisa wears many hats. She works at Bria Public Charter Schools, which is an amazing school. If you ever need a place to go be inspired by what early childhood education can look like, go visit. But you can also hear her talk a little bit about that in her presentation later this week. She's also on our advisory panel, our class advisory panel, and has been a great resource to me personally and to us as a community to understand actually this tension. So Bria Fit is a charter school in the Aussie sort of DC public school. They're part of an accountability system. And a part of what Lisa and so many of you have done is live in that tension. You live in a world in which you're a part of an accountability system that is sort of requiring use of class. But if you're here, I know that you're not just seeing that as something that is being done to you, but you see yourselves as active agents to take that and really make the most of it in your local community. And there's so many stories of that in this room, and we'll tell a few today. But I'm actually start us in a very different place. And I want you just to close your eyes for a minute and listen. And as you listen, think about this theme of how we come together for greater impact while also paying attention to the individuals in the room. I keep listening to it for a long time. But we're going to talk today about what's the collective music that we as a community are playing together. How are we playing that work in a collective? And as we do that, how are we doing it in ways that ensure it's the most inspiring, impactful music in ways that touch each and every, in which every musician there, whether they're one in the forefront or the conductor or the composer who wrote the music, feels like they have a part in something that is larger than themselves, but that they can also focus on doing the work that they are doing the very best. Along this journey of preparing for today, I was thinking and trying to find the sort of perfect song to play. And I learned through actually a New York Times article and then a New Yorker article about this incredible composer, Florence Price. She was actually born in the late 1800s in Little Rock, Arkansas. And amongst the amazing things about Florence Price is she was the first Black woman to have one of her symphonies played in a major orchestra in Chicago in the 1830s. But there's a lot of other fascinating things about Florence Price. And one of those is that she was really uniquely able to blend lots of musical traditions in the context of a sort of a large orchestra, taking in from blues music and jazz music and some of the ways in which the instruments interacted. But she also really did pay a lot of attention to these intersections between the individual and the whole. And I think in listening to just a couple minutes of that, you've heard some of that. Another really fascinating thing and sort of the basis of the New Yorker article is she was sort of forgotten from a lot of the public record until the 1990s, maybe a little later than that, when somebody found a bunch of her music in an attic. And it really reignited an interest in her work. So I would encourage all of you to read and learn more about her. But the question is, what is our music? I think at the core, we could say all of us walk into these classrooms where you just know that music is playing, right? There is something magical in great classrooms, in great schools, in great communities, where each individual is playing their role, but they are a part of something larger, a part of something that is a sort of collective. And I've been really inspired over the past few years by some work started at the Aspen Institute called the Social Fabric Project, or WEAVE. And they've written a lot about how communities, organizations come together and really weave the fabric. And there was something that was written called, sort of oddly, I think, the Relationist Manifesto, that is a part of the Social Weave Project. And those of you, raise your hand if you were with us in 2019 for InterAct. Anyone? So a few folks. So I read part of this at the very end of my keynote, which was at the very end of our time together. And I'll just read a small snippet of it. It says, when things are going really well, there's a process of weaving from the bottom up. When relationships are forming well, microscopic neural networks weave together in the brain. Individual personalities weave together and are made stronger. Families weave tighter bonds that are made more resilient. Neighborhoods become more coherent. Towns more vibrant. Regions more prosperous. Peoples more confident. Nations more just. And worlds more harmonious. Some people in this vast web weave in ways that are small and modest, and others launch programs that are epic and heroic, but it's all a part of the same self-reinforcing process of weaving, and everyone can play. Those words resonated with me 4 years ago, and they resonate with me today. I love the call out of play, something I think you all as early childhood educators probably do better than most. And so it's just made me think, how do we write about the things that draw us together? How do we talk about that work? And it's not about class, right? Class is maybe what helped us find each other. But there is something much deeper that connects each and every one of you. Why you all took time away from your jobs and your families to come here. I mean, I know it's also Miami, so it's nice. There are worse places to gather, but it's hard to leave. And there's something that draws you here. And so I've started, think of it as like a very early form of a composition that I want this community as a collective to help us write. And I'm not going to read all of it today because our time is short, but I'll just give you some pieces of it and look forward to sharing it out more broadly and getting some feedback. So as educators, we're acutely aware of the challenges facing our children and families and in the communities in which they live. The social fabric that once held our communities together is fraying in ways that have a profound effect on each and every one of us. Too many children walk into classrooms each day feeling disconnected and disinterested, unchallenged and unsupported. And educators are being asked to do more than ever before under increasingly challenging conditions without the compensation or recognition that they deserve. Families are working hard to maintain the basic supports they need to survive and thrive, and they're looking to educators for help. And of course we want to help because that's why we do this work. But the work is hard, and it's easy to leave each day ourselves feeling disconnected, disempowered, and simply tired. Yet, in the face of these challenges, we also find inspiration and community in one simple but powerful idea, that relationships are at the core of our collective impact. When we get that one simple hug, that high five, that child who says, "Oh, I got it," or that parent or fellow educator who says thank you, it fills us. It reminds us why we do this work, and it powers us through. It's these interactions, the relationships, they connect, they engage, and they inspire us. Without them, we're isolated in our attempts to impact the children and families that we serve. But we know that when we truly invest in relationships, when we do that work to center our daily lives around cultivating and sustaining meaningful relationships with each and every child, each and every family member, each and every educator, we can change the world one interaction at a time. This work cannot happen in isolation. It cannot happen without intention. And it can't happen without creating the time and space for the very interactions and relationships that sit at its core. That's why we gather together in places and spaces around the country and around the globe. In these spaces, we gather with intention to spend time thinking and learning and dreaming together about how we can do the work as individuals and as a collective to build a new social fabric, a fabric woven out of the life-changing power of relationships. There's a lot of commitments that we have in that work, and that's some of what I'm going to be listening for as I attend sessions. What are the things that hold us together? A few are, we know that we want to foster a sense of belonging. We want to embrace creativity and innovation. We want to build a sense of shared purpose. We want to encourage self-care, wellness, and play. And I'm just going to read a few words about that last one because I know you all work really hard, and that's probably the last thing you prioritize in this work. But just as the flight attendants on your flight out here said, if you're sitting next to a young child, make sure you have that air mask first. So true for all of us. So last but not least, we prioritize self-care and wellness for ourselves and our colleagues. We recognize that our work is challenging and demanding, and we encourage everyone to take care of their physical, emotional, and mental well-being. We take time to play together because we know that play rejuvenates the souls of all of us from birth through adulthood. So please take your time here to learn, to connect, but also to play. And let's make sure that we don't forget to have some fun. So just to dive into a few of the things that I talked about in that, and some of you have heard me or others of us talk about this. There was a time not that long ago when if you asked me what our sort of mission was at Teachdon, we said to impact teaching. And we've really decided that we as an organization, and I would expect this sort of community as a whole, have an opportunity to redefine what it means to be an educator, much more around the ideas of interactions than around teaching. Why? I mean, these definitions, I think, speak for themselves. To teach is to show or explain to someone how to do something. To interact is to act in such a way as to have an effect on another, and that it's reciprocal. It's not just teacher to child, it is child to teacher to coach, coach to teacher. And that is the essence of what educators do that is sometimes lost in a world in which we think our sole purpose, or we're told our sole purpose is to get a bunch of information into children's brains, right? You all know that's not what we're really there to do, but it can often feel like that. So I'm going to ask my friend and colleague, Marnetta, here she is, the fabulous Marnetta, to help us just experience a little bit of the difference between teaching and interacting. I'd come join you, but I think then my mic won't work. So I have the easy part because I'm going to be the teacher, and then she's going to help me interact. So after this, you guys are going to get a chance to do it. I'm going to ask you to find somebody, ideally who you don't know. If that makes you deeply uncomfortable, just turn to somebody you know and tell them a little bit because, there's always choice in our world, regard for attendees' perspectives. All right, but share something about where you're from. So, Bernetta, I am from Sacramento, California. Shout out to all my California colleagues here. A few things about California. About Sacramento, the capital. People may know that. It also, I think this is true, although sometimes maybe it's an urban legend, that it has more trees per capita than any other city. And I would say it was a lovely place to grow up. And I'm not sure I really want to live there anymore. But
So if I was to visit there and I only had a couple of days, what do you recommend that I do?
Well, as I said, there's a lot of trees. And there's several rivers. The American River runs through a lot of the town. And in fact, there's this incredible. Do you like to ride bikes? I do. So there's an incredible bike trail. It goes something like 30 miles that you can ride from downtown all the way up to this incredible fish hatchery place that I used to go when I was a young child. So that was one thing I would definitely have you do. Get outside.
So why did you choose that? Of all the things that you could do in Sacramento, why did you choose that one?
I think honestly, because I grew up a couple minutes from that place, and it just holds really incredible memories for me. I remember being there with my parents and my brother now and my mom passed away recently, and you're making me cry. But anyway, but yeah, so you should definitely visit Sacramento. All right, thank you, Marnetta. So. Small. Barnett is amazing. It's so, I felt so much different when suddenly I had a partner who was helping me tell the story and communicate what I was trying to say. So just so we don't have this entire 40 minutes of me talking at you, take a moment, get up, find somebody you don't know, and do your best to interact with each other as you tell a little bit about where you're from. So hopefully that brought a little bit of energy. And in fact, I was thinking as you saw those words at the very beginning in the Mentimeter, as much as we want our kids to feel those things, we want to feel those same things too. So hopefully just interacting brought a little bit of that to you all. The other thing I would say is, I've actually had people ask me this question, what's the difference between an interaction and a relationship, and why did we sort of write this narrative about relationships? And it's really because relationships are made up of interactions, but they're different than interactions. Interactions we can measure with class over a 20-minute period. You can't measure a relationship in 20 minutes, but it's evidence about the fact that there are relationships. There are these sort of dependencies and expectations created. And sometimes we think about relationships as very social and emotional, but they're actually cognitive as too. So children who are in classrooms, educators who are surrounded in settings where they frequently get really good feedback are used to getting good feedback, and that helps them develop this set of expectations, sort of relationships in a more cognitive way as well. And ultimately, it's all about really defining how we create these relationships. And so some of you may have seen this before, but this is a good friend and colleague of mine, Dominique McCain from Texas. Shout out to our Texas colleagues who are here. I know there were many folks from Texas who wanted to come who couldn't come because we were sold out, but this is a call out to our friends and colleagues there. Dominique, in 30 seconds, describes class better than I've ever heard it explained. So I'll let her speak for herself.
I describe class as the how of an educator's job. So often, educators are told the what of their job through a variety of evaluations and a variety of observations, but very seldomly does anyone get granular enough to help them understand immediate action they can take to transform what's happening in their classroom. Class does that. From the domains down to the dimensions, down to the indicators, down to behavioral markers, it teaches and gives a very clear path for educators of how to do their job. So to me, class is the how of an educator's job.
You guys agree? Like, good explanation of class, right? 30 seconds. One of the things that we've been doing, and you see it in our new Dimensions Guide, my colleague Veronica Fernandez, who runs our social impact and content teams, is deeply committed to this idea of making sure that we're doing work to help you all understand not only how those interactions impact educators in the classroom, but how they impact us in all of our work. So as we launch some of our new initiatives, our new Train the Trainer program, some revisions to some of our coaching work, you'll see us use these words: connect, engage, inspire learning. They're related to the domains, but they reflect this idea that what we're trying to do isn't about class. It's about the interactions that help us connect, engage, and then inspire learning. So the last question I'll ask is, how can we do this in ways that ensure we're working together for each and every child, each and every educator? Sometimes we let those words just roll off our tongue as if they mean the same thing. Each and every somehow come together. But ultimately, they mean something very different when we're focused on the each versus the every. And I would expect that some of you in this room spend much more of your time focused on the each. You work in a classroom with individual children. You work as a coach with individual teachers. And some of you spend your time, most of your time, focused on the every. You work on state systems trying to design. And hopefully you're in dialogue with each other. But we have to acknowledge that there's sort of tensions that are created as we work to serve the each and the every. And I think that's a tension that I know I feel like I live in a lot of the time at Teachdons, and I expect many of you live in as well. So to reflect on this a little bit, we had you sort of share out your roles, but think for just a moment back to our sort of metaphor of an orchestra. Are you a composer? Are you somebody who is writing the music for your state about how this work happens, or for your local community? Are you a conductor who takes that composition and plays it in your own particular way, guides that work in your local community? Are you a musician who takes the music but adds to it with your own special tone and voice as a coach or an educator? Are you an artisan, somebody who's making curriculum, making data systems, other things on which we play? Are you an audience member? Are you a music critic? Perhaps some of the researchers in the room might consider themselves musical critics, or are you someone else? And just know that these roles that we play sometimes place us in contrast with each other. Because what I, as an individual composer or artisan, want, I might make a violin and then you play it in a way that I didn't anticipate and I didn't want. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that actually makes us better. But there are a lot of tensions that are created. And when I think about the each and the every in our world, there's multiple tensions. And we're not going to talk about a lot of these at length this morning, but just listen for some of the themes that you might hear across the next 2 days. Is it actually possible to use class to create a system that leads to meaningful improvement and is also an accountability system? Is it possible? There's some folks in this room who certainly are proving the point that it is. Can we really focus on both effectiveness and efficiency at the same time? Efficiency sounds like such an awful, businessy world, but stuff costs money. It takes time. We really do have to be thinking about how we can do this work in efficient ways that allow us to put more of the resources towards the things that we want to do on the improvement side. Is it possible to have a really, really big impact while also having a broad impact? How do we hold these desires for an impact on the each and the every together? How do we dialogue when there are tensions? Just as little points of inspiration, here's just one example, and some of you have seen these before, of a state that has demonstrated the ability to design an accountability system that actually leads to sustained improvement. Call it to my Louisiana colleagues. I know there's some back there, maybe other places. I personally, we at Teachdons have learned a lot from the ways in which they use class. So what you see here are maps that represent over a 4-year period the growth in class scores at the system level, at the state level. Unique, not unique, but one of the unique things at the time of Louisiana is they were working in almost every program. Any single program who had a child who received federal or state funding, their center was required to be a part of their quality rating improvement system. So this really does represent the vast majority of sort of public settings. And what you see is systematic improvement year upon year. They actually also have really nice data on the ways that they closed gaps, where at the beginning, state pre-K had the highest class scores, followed by Head Start, followed by childcare, and you actually see gap closing with childcare programs sort of catching up in quality in ways that are the vision, right? We want our parents to be able to choose any place to put their kids, the place that is convenient, that feels like home. And they've been working really hard to be much more inclusive of the family childcare system over the past few years. So I would say it is possible, but if you want to hear more about the challenges in doing that work, there's a session that Cerintha Strickland and others leaders are talking about some of this state level work. Effectiveness and efficiency. I don't know how many of you know that the Office of Head Start this year actually conducted their federal reviews. There weren't stakes involved, but through video. Do we have any folks who are actually a part of the video pilot? All right, I want to talk to you. We want to hear about your experiences. So we partnered with DLH and with the Office of Head Start really around this idea of, can we collect class data more efficiently using video? Programs actually videotape themselves. They got to select the videos that they wanted to be uploaded to the system for scoring. So we will be sharing out more, and the Office of Head Start will as well. But as you can see here, just early results show there's pretty similar scores in class across video and live. Lots more to say about this. You know, it's complicated. We don't have it all figured out. But kudos to the leaders at the Office of Head Start and DLH for thinking about, if we do that, could we actually take more of the dollars that are going towards the accountability system and give them back to programs around the improvement side? Big and broad impact. Let's talk about Florida, where we are today. Raise your hand if you're from Florida. Okay, you guys want to talk about big and broad impact right now. Y'all in Florida, I know you are working incredibly hard. What you see here is some data from Florida around, and this is a couple of years old, around using our practice-based, or our group coaching model called MMCI. And they were able to demonstrate that MMCI, compared to lots of other forms of professional development, actually led to the most systematic improvement in interactions. They used that data as they had sort of ARPA funding coming in to run a big initiative. So right now, early childhood educators and leaders across the state are not only an accountability system, but also being given the resources to be able to take MMCI, but lots of other professional development and coaching opportunities around class. And importantly, they're even getting stipends for completing that. So the jury's still out on whether we'll sort of see those same big impacts as we scale. Again, lots of challenges in doing that work, but great sort of work happening to say, can we take something that works in a small place and use it much more broadly to create impact? And, you know, we at Teachdons have been deeply thinking about this each and every. Veronica and I and others in doing the work on Class Second Edition and other work have been really thinking about what we can do, what's our role to play in helping make sure that as people use class, they're using it in the ways that best support our dual language learners, family childcare, children with disabilities. I'd like to give a special thanks to our colleagues in Virginia, who sort of actually called out that we didn't have a lot of resources on our website around scoring on class for children with disabilities. And so they reached out, and over the course of about a month, we pulled together a bunch of resources. So now you can go up there. There's some videos highlighting what it looks like. We're not done. We know there's more to do. But I cite this as an example of, we want to interact with you as our partners. If there's something you are not seeing that you want us to be able to do, please reach out and let us know. We can't always say yes, but I guarantee you we'll always listen and do our best to help support the work that you are doing. With that, raise your hand if you've actually gone through training in Class Second Edition. All right, a fair number of folks. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this journey. I will tell you, and many of you sort of got a note about this over the course of the last week, it has been a journey, and it hasn't rolled out in the way that we would have loved to roll it out seamlessly all at once with everything that you need. But we are committed to making sure that the experience of Class Second Edition ultimately is the most impactful experience. And so it is taking us a little longer, but only because we want to get it right. And as we lean into this next phase of work, which will be around launching the new sort of train the trainer to empower you all to take this home, we want to make sure that we know and we have the evidence that it's working well. And we're really partnering with you to make sure we do that right. So Thank you for you early adopters. Please share feedback and let us know how it's going. And we're really excited to roll that out more broadly. All right, so I'm going to end with just this. A question. Will AI and machine learning make the work of composers, conductors, and musicians obsolete? Do we think? Is machine learning going to take over our work? I don't think so, but man, I can tell you I did use ChatGPT in this talk. Just a little bit. Have you guys used it? It's kind of fun. Like, I was a Saturday morning, I was drinking my coffee, interacting a little. It gave me some ideas. It did not write my talk. But I will just end with this. You always go to the source. So I asked ChatGPT basically this question: will you ever figure out how to interact? And it basically said, there's some things I don't think I'll ever be very good at doing. Here's a list of things it gave me: empathy and compassion, creativity, flexibility, trust and authenticity. This gave me a moment to say, okay, we got some time before they figure this out, where the work that we do as humans interacting with each other really matters. So, also, if you don't believe it, I did ask it to give me a few jokes just to test it. These are the worst jokes ever. So it just goes to say that it's not good at humor or wit, at least in my particular judgment, right? Bad, stupid jokes, right? So to close, just this beautiful thing that was totally unintended, and a woman who no longer works for us from Tennessee, Darlene Estes, pointed this out to me one time. She's like, did you know the words each one are embedded in Teachdon? So I love that, right? This idea that we are trying to do something big and not forgetting each one.